Hi, my name is Bill Boysenalt, and on behalf of the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy, I want to thank you and welcome you as we continue to celebrate the first 50 years of the Academy. 2024 marks the 50th birthday, which is a big birthday for any organization, any business. And the Academy has undertaken a number of activities to honor the past, celebrate the past, including creating, developing an historical timeline of key events that occurred over these previous years. The purpose of these couch conversations has been to highlight the events that not only help shape the academy, but also help shape the profession overall. And we've had 6 such conversations to date. Today, number 7 will be the final couch conversation looking back at the past. And it is very, very fitting that we are joined today by Dr. Stanley Paris in the 7th and final couch conversation. Dr. Paris is the founding father of the Academy. He spearheaded the Academy formation, which, as we will hear, took 6 or 7 years to accomplish. Dr. Paris helped guide it through the AOPT House of Delegates approval process, getting a section approval at that time. And subsequently, he was elected as the first president of the Academy. And after finishing his terms, served numerous official and unofficial roles within the Academy. In recognition of his contributions, the section created the Paris Distinguished Service Award, and Stanley was the first recipient of that award in 1990. So Stanley, it is a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Bill, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be alive these 50 years and to be able to share some thoughts with you. But this great orthopedic section, as you know, you're now using the term academy.
Right.
And by the way, I don't think I was the first president. I was the first chairman. Back then, we used the term chairman. President came later. And part of that was the thinking that if you are running an organization, you should be the chairman, whereas presidents get a little bit dictatorial at times. So I was very happy with the title of chairman, but now I'm considered a past president. That's okay.
That's a good historical footnote. That's perfect. You know, Stanley, today the Academy has over 16,300 members.
Oh, wow.
It has a permanent office building in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It has 7 staff. It has JOSPT, which really is 3 journals, plus it has its magazine. And the Academy has contributed $1.5 million to the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research. In that first year, it had 740 members. There was no office building. There was no staff. In fact, I think you mentioned to me at some point along the way that the section office really was a closet in your home that contained boxes filled with papers. Those early days, did you ever imagine the Academy would evolve to where it is today?
No, and I didn't imagine that physical therapy would be such a large profession as it is today with the level of acceptance that it has. It's higher level of autonomy than ever. But I worked for it as well as everyone else because we believed that in the best interest of the patient, we needed clinical specialization to advance physical therapy, to advance its autonomy, and so that we could better serve the public. And we knew we had to wrestle with the medical profession to gain a number of those rights. And so I imagined it, yes, but did I think it would happen? I don't know, but it has, and I'm very pleased with where we are today in many respects, not all.
Yeah. So, well, good. You should be very proud of what was created and the impact it has had. So you mentioned some of the driving forces or some of the issues that led to the creation of the section itself. Were there any other driving forces besides those that you just mentioned?
Well, just take a minute or two to talk about what physical therapy was like in the 1960s when we started to work to get the section formed in 1974. Physical therapy depended on a medical referral complete with a diagnosis and a prescription. Doctors, as you know, most of them don't know the first thing about physical therapy or what it is we can do. And the musculoskeletal system, which is the largest area of physical therapy, is not in their training or education to any degree. Anatomy of the arm and leg could be an elective at some medical school, and the cadavers never get off their backs. And the head and neck goes to the dental school, and so forth. So doctors don't know the musculoskeletal system, yet they were in charge of us. They ran our state boards, they authorized our schools and the content of what was instructed. That had to change. And so those of us interested in orthopedics and other specialty areas, sports, we started to agitate and try and make some changes. When we tried to form a section, because the only two sections at the time in the 1960s were the education section and private practice. And all the education people thought they should never have had a section on private practice. We should not be making money. We should be salaried in hospitals. Anyhow, Ron Payton was interested in sports. I was interested in manual and manipulative therapy. And he was at the same time trying to agitate for specialization in sports within physical therapy. So a committee was formed by the APTA with Nancy Watts as chair, Ron Payton as a clinician on that committee, and Roger Nelson. That committee surveyed some members. I don't know who they surveyed or how extensive it was, but they were about to report to the House of Delegates that there was no interest in clinical specialization in physical therapy. When I got wind of that, I knew that they were totally wrong, because when we had tried to form a section, APTA, on manipulation, APTA said no. So we went ahead and founded an academy, the North American Academy of Manipulation Therapy, combining Canada and the United States in those interested in manual and manipulative therapy. And I spoke before the House saying, we have 942 members in our manual and manipulative therapy group, mostly American. If you don't give us a home within physical therapy, many of my members will wonder if their APTA membership is worth anything. And as a result of that, they scrapped the report from the committee, which was going to recommend against specialization, and we got the orthopedic section agreed to. So the interest was in manual and manipulative therapy. The compromise was the orthopedic section, and that was okay. But fast forward, 1992, the orthopedic section had grown so large that those of us who were interested mainly in manual and manipulative therapy were being overwhelmed by the size of the meeting and the lack of collegiality and opportunity to share within our field. So we broke away and founded the American Academy of Orthopaedic Manipulative Physical Therapy. It became endorsed by the orthopedic section and in turn was endorsed by the APTA. So we got to be a member of IFOMT. IFOMT was founded in 1974, the same year as the orthopedic section, but we could not be a member of IFOMT.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the international collaboration that was occurring and the genesis of the section. Not surprising with your background and your close contacts with physical therapists in Canada, as well as in Europe and New Zealand, Australia. So there was a broad reach of this interest group. It's also kind of ironic that it was manual manipulative therapy that helped drive this, yet that was an obstacle in the beginning working with APTA, and then the subsequent steps that you went through to compromise.
Well, let me be clear. I certainly was interested in orthopedics and sports. I was the first ever physical therapist to the Olympic team, Rome 1960, and again 1968 in Mexico. So I had a broad orthopedic musculoskeletal background. But I felt that those things were acceptable in physical therapy, sports, and orthopedics, where what was not accepted and what should become accepted and is now accepted was manual and manipulative therapy. So that's where I placed my efforts, principally in that area.
You mentioned a couple of key people that you collaborated with, Ron Payton, Eugene Michaels, who was the APTA president at that time. Who were some of the other key individuals that you collaborated with to make this happen?
Well, I guess a number of people on the board, not too many educators, because they were against manipulation, they being very much under the control of the medical profession. I came to America as a faculty position at Boston University. I think I got the job based on my resume. I'd published a couple of articles, one in the New Zealand Medical Journal and a textbook. Both were on the spine. Both advocated manipulation. But when I got my job, I don't think anybody had read what I was writing about. But soon after I arrived, they took a look at my book and saw that I advocated manipulation, and they forbade me to lecture, edit, write, teach, associate with that field at all. So I resigned from the university, of course, and went into private practice and started teaching seminars. But the people who I was associated with, the founding of the orthopedic section, were the people like Sandy Burkhart, who I've seen you've interviewed already, and who subsequently has passed. Yeah. I'm very pleased that you got to interview him before his untimely departure. Peter Edgelow, who has also passed, and there was Dorothy Santi. She and I wrote the history at one point, and I thank you for sending me that article. I had misplaced it. Stan Schlachter and Walt Personius. And I'm sure there were many others that helped us in the initial year. What I did early on is I stepped down. When you start an organization, everyone gets like a 4-year term. But if everyone kept their 4-year term, at the end of that, everyone would go and you'd be replaced with a bunch of novices. So I only took a 2-year term just to help start the rotation. And a couple of others did the same thing.
Yeah. Part of your role as president, you were also editor of the Bulletin, correct?
Yes. Well, that started out as a newsletter and then became a bulletin. But I soon appreciated the skills of Jim Gould. Yeah. And I could see that Jim was a better writer, editor than was I. And his partner in practice was George Davies. And George Davies' interest was sports, and Jim's was obviously orthopedics, but the two of them in practice together, so it made good sense. And I said to Jim, you're taking this over. You need to go down to Williams and Wilkins in Baltimore and talk about starting a journal. And they together agreed on starting a journal of orthopedic and sports physical therapy. I think that was a brilliant stroke, bringing those two things together. And I compliment both of them for that.
Yeah, it was a great synergy between the two. Actually, in the JOSPT is celebrating its 45th anniversary.
That's about right.
I interviewed George Davies, and he talked about how he and Jim the families would get together and they would put labels on the journals and take them to the post office to put them in the mail. It's kind of unbelievable.
I did that with the Orthopaedic Bulletin for quite a while.
Yeah, as well. So starting any organization is not an easy task. What were some of the major challenges that you and your first board faced?
Well, I knew very little about starting an organization, and there was no sort of model to do it. So I had to hire attorneys and, of course, had to fund these things. I guess getting people to realize that coming to seminars was not enough, that we had to work as a body to improve the whole profession, not just our own practice skills, but the whole profession, and get an organization together. So getting interest in that, I thought would be very difficult. But as you learned, we founded the North American Academy of Manipulation Therapy in 1967. 7 years later, we had 942 members. That's pretty big back then. And so it had a momentum to it. In those days, manual and manipulative therapy was not taught at schools of physical therapy to undergraduates. It was taught to graduates who had clinical experience. They came with a desire to learn more, to improve their efficiency at treating patients. And they appreciated everything that they could receive from experienced teachers. Like myself, we brought Carlton over from Norway. We brought Rocabato up from Chile. And we had others coming down from Canada to help teach and enlarge our scope of practice in manual and manipulative therapy. there was a great excitement. And today, we're faced with a different situation where manual and manipulative therapy is now required to be instructed, including thrust techniques, which I'm totally opposed to students. And it's often being taught by faculty who are not active clinically and never attain the advanced skills required for this. And so I think today now there's, like with massage, this kind of a loss of interest. They think they graduate knowing it, and they really don't. And so manual and manipulative therapy, in some respects, is struggling to maintain the standard that it once had.
Yeah, there was a recent publication in the Physical Therapy Journal looking at a modern definition of orthopedic manual therapy. Jason Silverthorne, Gail Dial, yes. Gail Jensen were amongst the group, and hopefully that publication will help guide the profession as this area evolves.
Yes, I think it's an excellent publication. There was quite a few authors signed on to it too, which was good.
Yes. That was published in March of 2024.
Right.
Now, I also found it interesting that early on, as this organization evolved, you outsourced some activities. I noted that Florence Kendall was brought in to help create the early bylaws or revamp the bylaws.
Revamp them.
Yeah. So you tapped into other resources within the profession at that time.
Well, and that's the role of a chairman or president, to reach out and make the whole thing work. It's a leadership role, and no one can know it all. And even if you do know it all, you don't have enough energy. It requires a lot of energy from a lot of people to make something like a section, now academy, be successful. And we could see the interest, but we were being watched very carefully by the APTA, that was not happy about our having been formed and was concerned about clinical sections. That concern went away by about 1978, I think, within just a few years. Other sections started to form too. And now, as you know, the combined section meeting is the only big meeting of APTA now, and it's highly successful. And so we are now a profession that recognizes clinical specialty.
Yeah, very much so. In hindsight, in terms of the approval process, the early days of the section, anything you would do differently that may have sped things up or made things a little easier in subsequent years?
Well, thank you for sending me these questions in advance. I appreciated that. And I gave a bit of thought to that. The compromise that we made in forming the orthopedic section was probably necessary, but I think in retrospect, it would have been better if we had not made that compromise. But that if we said, yes, go form an orthopedic section, but we need a section on manual and manipulative therapy. And we never got that. We became part of the orthopedic section and overshadowed by it eventually. But our problem was, we in manual and manipulative therapy wanted to belong to AOPT, the International Federation of Orthopaedic Manipulative Therapy, now manipulative physical therapy. And in order to do that, you had to pass an exam. And the section and academy structure does not allow membership by examination. Right. Anybody can join any section they want. I could join the pelvic section tomorrow if I wanted to, right, or the sports section tomorrow, just by paying my fee. But to be a member of AOPT, you can only be a voting member of your section or organization if you've passed the qualifying exams that met the standards for practicing manual and manipulative therapy. And we couldn't do that within the orthopedic section. That's one of the main reasons we eventually broke away and formed the American Academy of Orthopaedic Manipulative Physical Therapy. I think from the start, if we had held out on that, it might have been a better approach. And we would still be closer united to the APTA than we are now as a freestanding body. But it would have taken APTA to recognize that some sections or academies have the right to be exclusive to those who have passed an exam. They can be an affiliate member or associate member, but not a voting member until they've passed the qualifying exam. I think that would have been a good move. And it would have been interesting to see how that would have affected residencies and fellowships today.
Right. Right. So it may have delayed the formation a while, but in the long run, that may have been a better process, a better outcome.
Right? I can't be sure of that, but there we are.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I've asked this to everybody I've interviewed, had some pretty good comments with this, but any behind the scenes humorous events that people never would be aware of by reading the newsletter or the bulletin or the journal? Any such events that you recall?
Well, in truth, I don't. Maybe I lack a sense of humor. I don't know. I can remember some very fine dinners. I can remember going to a dinner one night at one function. We had a belly dancer come up to our table, which was quite interesting. I spilt my soup, but I can't remember anything that would be of interest to members. No.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Bill.
Well, no, fair enough. Fair enough. So then I'll flip that a little bit. Reflecting on your section experiences, what do you value most from the experiences that you've had?
Oh, I think the collegiality, and I think being involved in a section and becoming an officer is a tremendous personal learning experience, because now you're seated with people who are as energetic and as convinced about their position as you are of yours, and wanting to contribute to a whole. You get on a team of people, all of who've got hopefully different talents that they bring to bear. And you don't get that in business. You get, because there's always a leader in business. That's why, again, I like the term chairman rather than president, because presidents tend to become arrogant leaders. I like chairmen who bring together the collective wisdom of a group. And my concept of chairman is they don't get to vote unless to break a tie. They get just to marshal opinions and get things done. And I like that. But so that's a great experience. So if you join a section, and everybody should join one or two of them, particularly in the younger years, and if you step up and volunteer to take part, because there's always committees you can get on, and then after a couple, getting to understand things, prepare yourself by learning Robert's Rules of Order. Spend some time studying that, because that teaches you governance and teaches you how to give up and speak and make changes to motions and improve motions, and also to present your own ideas and defend them. Without knowing Robert's rules, you can be railroaded by anybody who doesn't approve of what you're trying to get done. So it's an essential skill for young people to develop in an association. And it facilitates the whole process for everybody when people understand Robert's rules. So it's a great experience, and I encourage the youth of our profession to get involved in their specialty areas and get involved on committees and eventually on the executive of their section academy.
Yeah, I would agree with you in terms of the value of belonging and participating. It's the people you meet, you get to know, and that you develop collegial relationships with that last your entire career, which really make the time investment well worthwhile. Yeah.
Agree.
In terms of early career, you gave some good advice in terms of how to get involved and starting on a committee, but understanding how business is done with Robert's rules is a really important part of that process. And mentoring. I mean, current leaders and mentoring early career or mid-career physical therapists, and to help them assume and help them qualify for leadership roles is all part of that. Any other advice related to getting involved and starting to assume leadership positions, leadership roles?
Yeah. Step back, take a look at how things are functioning. Everything can be improved. Any motion or anything we approve of today as to how we should do something will probably not be the way we do it in 30 years.
Right.
So not in 20 years. So why wait that long? You should almost be doing continuous quality improvement. So you can critique anything in a sense of saying, all right, when this comes up again, it could be improved by doing such and such. So be skeptical of our best efforts and look for ways to improve them, because that can be done. And the other thing I'd say, just step up and volunteer. I think volunteering is one of the most powerful tools. I mean, how did I get to be the first ever physical therapist on an Olympic team? I had no experience, but I was going over to Europe to study, and I thought I might go down to the Olympics. So I wrote to the Olympic Committee in New Zealand, and I said, I'm going to be in Rome. I'd be happy to come into the village. Each day I'll stay at a youth hostel. I'll come in on my scooter and treat anybody who needs treating. And the next thing I knew, they appointed me a member. I think the fact that I got myself there at my own cost helped. I walked on with the uniform and everything into the opening ceremonies and could get to go see all the events because I was on medical services, is what my badge said. And that got you into everything.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience. And I repeated it a couple of times, also the Commonwealth Games. But I only got there by volunteering, showing the initiative. And I think that's true with a lot of things in life.
Yeah, you're right. If you wait for the door to open, it may never open. And so you need to knock on the door. It doesn't mean all doors are going to open for you, but generally they won't without you knocking on those doors.
Oh, I like what you've just said. That takes me to Winston Churchill. He had a very similar statement. He said, it takes someone to open the door for you, and you must ask for that favor. But when that favor has been granted and that door has been opened for you, don't ever let that person down who opened the door for you. Thank them and honor them. And that was one of Churchill's way of making progress. He never hesitated to ask a favor of someone to advance himself and his ideas, but he always remembered them and was respectful to the people who helped him.
Yeah. Stanley, the upcoming college conversations, we're going to flip to the future. Whether it's the next 10 years, next 20 years. What do you see the biggest challenges facing not only the academy, but the profession overall?
Well, when I think about that, I have to think about the student body today. Are they the same kind of students? Do they have the same kind of energy and commitment to the profession that we saw some years ago? That would be the first thing. And the second would be, what's going to be the effect of artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
So addressing the first, physical therapy reimbursement today, I think we'll all agree, is not what it should be. Back in 1998, when the Balanced Budget Act hit the profession, and for the first time we had some unemployed therapists, salaries were dropped from an average of about 70,000 to about 60. And for the first time, physical therapists some were unemployed. Same with nursing and occupational and speech therapists. $6 billion was cut from healthcare, principally Medicare and Medicaid. Since that time, our salaries have not kept pace with inflation. We continue to see reductions in our reimbursement. If we were 70,000 back then, we should be 140,000 today, and very few therapists at 1 or 2 years graduation are earning anything like 140,000. We are not, but some other professions are. And so I would say we have failed. I'd say the APTA has failed, but we are the APTA. We, each one of us, and we have failed to make our value appreciated by other than our patients. Our patients appreciate us. They know that. The medical profession is increasingly appreciating us. It's the legislators and the insurance companies that have no incentive, it seems, to facilitate our getting a better reimbursement. As a result, we're not going to get such good quality students coming into our profession. If the reimbursement is not satisfactory, they can do better elsewhere in law, business, physician's assistant. So we're going to lose out on the top talent. Now, the top talent, A student, doesn't mean to say you're getting the best student. I'm a C student, so I honor C students. We're the ones who hard grind away. We get there by our effort, and we can succeed. But overall, though, we would like a handful of those top students as well. I don't know that we're going to keep getting them with the current reimbursement. And as a result of that, perhaps I'm not seeing as much commitment to the profession as I used to see. It was not unusual 15 years ago for someone to take a week or 2 weeks out of their life and go and attend a seminar. Today, you're lucky if you can keep them there for 2 days.
Right.
They want to get away early on the second day. They're not willing to give up a piece of their lifestyle, a piece of their personal monies and time to commit themselves to advance their skill set within the profession. To me, it's a great shame. They believe when they get out of school, they know most everything. They do not. At best, they are safe novices. That's when the learning begins. Now, hopefully, residencies and fellowships will fill in that gap because they're not going to seminars like they used to go. Now, as to artificial intelligence, I believe that much of what we do in physical therapy, particularly in orthopedics, could be replaced by a very intelligent robot fed with all the science, exercise science, who can monitor you 24/7 with a wristband or whatever it will be, encouraging you, adapting your exercises, and keeping you on track. I think looking at the future, it's going to be very important, no matter what clinical area you're in, is that you develop that clinical presence of the advanced clinician, the master clinician, and you have hands-on skills. In this increasing age of high tech and low touch, touch is going to mean more to the patient. It begins with a handshake, and it carries on to everything we do, whether it's in neurology or cardiopulmonary or manual and manipulative therapy. If you don't have those hands-on skills and that personal presence with a patient, you might be replaced by a robot and become redundant. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. We're in the early days of this advanced technology, but it's a little scary, and it should be to a number of therapists who don't have the ability to relate well to a patient.
Yeah, those are two big issues: the return on investment, people willing to pay the money for tuition, etc., going through a DPT program. And you're right, salaries have not kept pace with as our roles and responsibilities has evolved, and we're taking more responsibility in many situations. You would think the salaries would increase accordingly, but we're not seeing that across the board, certainly.
There is an answer in part to it, and that's what I'll call the boutique practice. I don't see any harm in a young or inexperienced physical therapist who has reached the top of their game for going into private practice and going off insurance. I don't see why therapists straight out of school get paid the same as a 20-year experienced therapist who's board certified and done a fellowship. That is totally wrong to me. I think we should have a different scale within our system for people who have done a fellowship. In New Zealand, for instance, they have specialist practitioners, physical therapy practitioner status. They get higher paid. Same in England. But we've always said, oh, we'll advance our skills from bachelor's to master's to doctorate, and we'll go through residencies and fellowship, but you'll all be paid the same. That is stupid. So it forces someone who is particularly talented, and that should be a large percentage of our profession, to go into private practice and go off insurance in a boutique practice and treat patients and charge accordingly. That, I think, is going to be a safeguard for the best of the profession. And a number are succeeding at it. It resists working for a corporation. It resists working under Medicare and Medicaid. And it caters, yes, unfortunately, to those who can afford it. And that's a shame. So if you're going to go into that style of practice, perhaps you will do 10% pro bono to feel better about what you're doing. But it will provide you with an opportunity for enjoyable practice where you're really appreciated and you can make a good income.
And, I've met a number of kind of early to mid-career physical therapists that have established such a boutique practice as you described, and many of them do provide a certain percentage of pro bono care. That's one of the things that gives me some encouragement about the future. Is I've seen some really creative practice models out there developed by these early mid-career people, and they've been very, very successful at it. So hopefully, I agree with you. More and more, we'll see more and more of that.
Well, I hope they publish how they did it, what their model or models are, what worked, what didn't work, to assist everybody else in the profession. Not me. I'm 86 now, and not going back into private practice anytime soon.
So your boutique practice days are over, it sounds like.
Yes.
Also to highlight your comments about residency education, I mean, a new graduate is a new graduate, whether they're coming out of dental school, med school, a DPT program, and the other professions. It's just expected that you will do a residency and then maybe a fellowship.
Yes.
And I also find it interesting that most of our physical therapists are not specialists in our current system. And there really isn't a residency path for our generalist or our primary care physical therapist. If you're in that kind of a practice model, primary care or our generalist, you're being asked to learn more and more about more and more. When you specialize and subspecialize, you learn more and more about less and less. Your focus becomes more narrowed. And so I'm hoping that at some point we'll have a residency pathway for our primary care physical therapist or generalist.
Well, that's been a special interest of yours, and introducing medical diagnostics into the profession. A key area, if we have autonomy, we need to be taking more responsibility because if we're the primary care physician, if you like, of the neuromusculoskeletal system, we have to know more than we were originally taught some years ago. We've got to be able to replace at least part of the basic medical examination. And I think that's very important. And thank you for your contribution there.
Yeah, thank you. So Stanley, any final thoughts about the academy, our section, the formation, how it's evolved?
No, not really. I just hope that it maintains the standards that it's had in the past. I'm talking about the section. Yeah. Last year, for instance, at the annual meeting, there was no annual business meeting for the first time. There were a lot of functions, but even those functions like the Paris Distinguished Service Award that usually carries a medal, there was no medal. And the Rose Award, which is usually accompanied by roses to the distinguished members of the section, they were absent too. And I think those touches are important because they distinguish the section. They honor our founders and those who, like Steve Rose, have made great contributions in research and so on. And we need to do that. And when young people see that being done, they can aspire to that. When that's not done with any proper ceremony, then there's little to aspire to, and you just settle into where you are already. Aspiration, leadership, examples, mentors, that's what shows us a pathway ahead in our lives. And if we don't have them and don't see them in our association, then it's a falling away. And I think, while some award ceremonies can go on too long, I don't think they need to go on as long as they sometimes do. Certain aspects of it need to be preserved and celebrated.
Yeah, those kind of traditions to highlight and to honor, and as you said, give people a target to aspire to are really important mechanisms in place. Well, very good. Well, Stanley, I want to thank you for your time and your insights, and certainly all you've done for our section, our academy, and the profession as well. And it's still good to see that you're still involved. You're still watching and watching over things, and serving as a mentor for so many of us over the years.
Well, I'm off to Switzerland this weekend for the IFOMT meeting in Basel, and I'll have a few words to say there. So they're celebrating their 50th also.
As well, that's right, 1974.
And I was the founding chairman and second president.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Bill, very much for this opportunity to share my thoughts with the members of our academy.
Yeah, it was a pleasure and an honor, Stanley. This is a wonderful way, again, to wrap up our look back at the first 50 years. As I mentioned early on, the future couch conversations will be pivoting to the next 10 or 20 years and interviewing key individuals that are kind of setting the direction, setting the course for future orthopedic practice, education, and research. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.